Welcome everybody, I am Mark, and this is my very first vlog post. I plan on doing one of these every week, and while I could just pick an activity to do for each of them, or talk about what is going on in my life that week, that's just not me. I have a tendency to try to turn everything that I possibly can into a teaching moment, and these videos will be no different. Now what can I teach in a vlog video on YouTube? Well, I plan on covering a topic in each one relevant to life in my rural community here in Michigan. And I will be covering them from my point of view, obviously, it's the only one I have. And that is of somebody who was born here and lives here now, but who actually grew up and spent the majority of his life in the city in Los Angeles. So a lot of these will have to do with the differences between city and rural life, and how I had to adjust being an adult, moving here for really the first time that I can remember, and learning to deal with all the nuances of rural life and how things differ here from what it's like in the city. By doing so, I hope to create a little bit of a bridge of understanding between city and rural people. To help city people understand what it would be like for them if they suddenly had to switch gears into a rural life. And to help people who grew up and really only know rural life to understand what it's like for those same people from the city to have to adjust to what it's like here. What are those differences? I mean, there's a lot of little lessons you have to learn, and I just sort of had to pick them up along the way. I still learn new things every year. I've picked up new ones even up to this year. It's been almost 20 years. Nobody gives you a book. There's no course on this. I suppose in some ways these videos will be that course, but it's only going to be the things that I come across. That's just how it goes. But anyway, it's just there to create a little bit better understanding between people. And, what better endeavor is there in life than to develop greater understanding of your fellow human being, people from different circumstances, different walks of life. And I think that's one of the better things that we can do in our life is understand one another. So, if you agree and you want to come with me for these things, learn my first lesson, I'm just about to head on over and start it up. So here we are on my back lawn. It is the beginning of October, and I have not mowed really much of any lawn since the last weekend in June. And that's pretty outrageous for here in Michigan. In a normal year, if I did not mow for more than 3 months, this grass would grow. I mean, this is like native wild meadow grass. It would grow up probably over my head, almost certainly over my head by this point. It would be as tall as it could get. It would have flowered out in brownish red flowers, probably a month in or something like that. Those would have gone to seed, and it would just be kind of half dead back here, but still tall, and like a meadow. But the only thing that's like a meadow right now are the weeds and the wildflowers. And they are growing, but the grass is not. And the reason for that, if you read the title or looked at the thumbnail, I guess I gave that away, didn't I? You all passed this test. It's that it's just not raining. It's not raining anywhere near as much as it normally does here in the summertime, or even in late spring. It started happening. We've been in an abnormally dry to drought pattern, really, for most of the last 2.5 years. Basically since the spring or maybe early summer of 2020. It's been quite dry. Either abnormally dry or moderate, even occasionally some severe drought. severe doesn't last very long. It comes up spotty and goes away. And it's been, spotty throughout the whole region for most of those years, but this year it's been really widespread. Basically the entire thumb of Michigan, where I live, is in abnormally dry or drought conditions, and has been for just basically this whole summer. Now, we got one big rainstorm in early August. It dropped a couple inches over 2 days. And that's like the only reason that this particular spot, this spot in the south end of my county where I am, is technically abnormally dry. We're in moderate drought, but that rainstorm alone basically brought us back up to just abnormally dry. And we've remained there since early to mid-August. Now, it's unusual for here. I mean, we have periods of drought. It happens. And they come and they go. We have periods of greater than normal rain, too. And they tend to balance out. But it's just quite amazing to see how widespread it is and to see how much of an effect it's had on my lawn and on various other things, too. This is how it affects me. Droughts here in Michigan are different than droughts where I was in Southern California. Now, probably 2 out of every 3 years that I lived there, it was technically in some kind of drought. And a drought there would mean, if you didn't water your lawn with sprinklers, it would go brown and die. Now here, the lawn itself, the grass, did not die. It's still green. It's not growing. It's like halfway dormant. It's kind of like how it would be in about a month from now when it starts to get really cold and it goes dormant for the winter. It would start to go brown, but it's like right before that. And that's just what we have here. We have a green grass drought, you might want to call it, instead of a brown grass drought like you get in the Southwest. And the effects are different for different people. Like, for me, I'm just a guy with a house here. For me, it's not much of anything. I don't farm. For me, it's just, you don't have to mow. Oh, what a tragedy. How will I ever survive? I don't have to spend 2 hours a week and 3 gallons of gas every week to mow several acres of grass. Oh no, what a punishment. Now, for those who do farm, and there's still quite a few who do, it's not as widespread as it was like when my dad was a kid. I mean, he was a farmer himself. For them, it's their livelihood. It's got to be affecting their crop yields. It's probably not super bad. But if you're only getting half to maybe a third of your normal rain, it's got to be affecting your yields. Those crops expect a certain amount of water, and you plant kind of according to that. It has to be affecting them, so it's probably hitting your livelihood at least a bit. It's not so severe that everything's withering away, but the yields have to be down at least somewhat, and that stings. It's not great for them. It's not great at all. It's pretty bad. Could be worse. It could be like the Southwest, where they're in the midst of probably the worst drought conditions that they've seen for over 1,000 years, according to various climatological data, things like tree samples and such. It's pretty bad there. They have something to be absolutely alarmed about. We have something that is of some mild concern, except for the last class of things, those that are the most vulnerable to drought conditions. They don't have a way to mitigate them at all, and that would be the wildlife. Notable in their absence since really probably the end of June are the American robins. These are ubiquitous birds. They're all throughout North America. They get almost everywhere in North America except for maybe the North Slope of Alaska by late summer. But for most of the summer, they haven't been here. They're gone. And, the reason is that they eat earthworms. And if it's not raining, the earthworms aren't coming up, so, they got nothing to eat. So they have two choices. They can starve, or they can fly away to some place where it is raining enough. And there are plenty of places in Michigan. Down south of us, it was better, but it has gotten into drought now, too. So if they moved down there, they've had to move west since then. But, they have wings, so they fly, and some of the most mobile, adaptable type of creatures on the planet. So, they've got choices of where they can go. So they do. It's either that or starve, so you got to move. But, I miss them. They're a constant presence around here. In a normal year, there'd be probably a dozen of them around my property at any given time during the day. And really during the whole day. That's one of the things that I like about them. Not only are they colorful, and I don't have a lot of colorful songbirds living here. You can see I don't have like a lot of tall canopy type trees around. That's the kind of things that they like to build nests in. So, anything that comes out that's colorful, and robins are, the dark reddish-orange breast on them, they're a nice colorful bird. And that's cool, but what's great about them is how industrious they are, how much tenacity they have to keep going after those worms. They are some of the first birds you'll see in the morning. They are some of the last birds you'll see when it's getting dark at night. It's the same with the rain. They will stay out longest in the rain when it starts getting heavier and heavier. It has to get pretty darn heavy for the robins to go in. And they'll be some of the first to come out when it starts to lighten up a little bit too. You gotta hand it to them. They're pretty great. They're right on it, and it's admirable. So it's quite a work ethic. But you just don't see them around because the rain's not here, so the earthworms aren't here, so they're not going to be here. And they're notable in their absence. I'm sure it affects the frogs in some way, and some of the other things too. Although you can still hear them around in the trees and such. They're out and about. There are obviously some places. There's some wet spots around here that probably are still holding some water, and they can live in those. So but I'm sure it affects their numbers, and probably other animals that I'm not even thinking of. Probably some bugs and things like that. And, kind of go beyond your notice. But there it is. It's an effect. And it happens all the time. It's been happening these last few years over the summers. Now we've had some catch-up periods in between. In fact, a little bit last fall and somewhat the winter before that. And then late this winter, it caught up. And as spring arrived, for the first few months, first couple months, till about mid-May, it actually was raining probably more than normal. And it was, optimists like me thought, oh, well, that's it. The dry spell is over. It's going to go back to a more normal or maybe even above normal rainfall period. But it was a fake out. It only lasted a couple months, and it just stopped again in mid-May. It had rained so much that I wasn't able to mow back in the very back, and because it's low back there, and I'll go back there and tell you why in just a moment, next section of video. But yeah, I wasn't able to mow until the very end, until the last 2 times that I mowed, so late June. So for a month, it retained water from that, but it all went away, and that's just how it's been. It's been like that for the last few years. Especially in the summers. This one was unique though, because we would get spotty rain and pickups and such that it would be enough to make the grass grow, and I would have to mow basically every week, which is normal. You mow about every week, and sometimes even at a week, there are places where it gets so thick that the mower struggles a little bit, and you have to slow it down and take it easy on it. But, usually a week is about a standard for mowing. But, 3 months, that's pretty extreme. And that's what we've had this year. So now here we are at the very back corner of my property. This area is intentionally low compared to the rest. It was a drainage ditch when this was still farmland, and then when my parents got it, my dad kept it as basically a drainage ditch and made sure to grade the land and put in tiling also. More on tiling, and there will be another video, but it's going to be several months away in the spring, because that's when tiling really does its thing, and it's when it's noticeable, and when it fails for brief periods of time too. But one way or the other, there will be a video on it, whether it's working well or having a little problem. But for now, I'll just say that tiling is, instead of grading, which is just moving all the land, moving dirt around to make sure that the land all slopes into one direction, drains off. Tiling is to get through things like our house, which is built up in between here and there. It's built up higher than the land in front of it and the land behind it. So you got to divert away from around that. And tiling works very well to go underneath stuff. You basically take that's plastic tubing. You take and you bury it in the ground in a trench and make sure it has fall to move the water. And it does that. It moves the water underneath and it brings it back in. And Dad did a very good job with that, by the way. He'd been a farmer, and he had a lot of experience and skills that he put to use when he graded and tiled this land and worked on the drainage, and he did a darn good job. Good on you, Dad. Anyway, when in the spring, we don't generally have a lot of ponding in front when the snow melts. And, it happens a lot because, there's all that snow melts and there's suddenly a bunch of water and the ground's kind of frozen still, so it doesn't absorb in immediately. So it leaves ponding. And you see a lot when you go down the road. Various neighbors, people just anywhere, they've got significant ponding in their front. And we just don't have that. And it's because Dad really worked on the drainage here. So it's a pretty good thing. I'm glad he did it. And there you go. So we have this area usually filled with water. Like about 2/3 of the time it'll have some water in it. And in fact, it's probably even more often than that. You just can't see it. It's just shallow. You walk back here and it would squish. Or if I was sitting in it like this, I'd be wet on my butt. But it's just not. It's not that way this year. It's dry. I mean, you can see that it's got a different kind of grass in it. It's a different color than the stuff in the back, and in front of it as well. It's a little more bluish, and it doesn't have all the wildflowers and things that were around, and the weeds and such that were around me. They just can't grow in that puddled water, I guess. Some things can, some things can't. And there you go. That's what we have. But yeah, it's dry, and it's very unusual. It's been dry, at least since I was able to mow back here in late June. It's been dry. It did hold some water, and in fact, this whole area held some water in the spring when we had the fake out of a lot of rain. In fact, I tried to mow back here, and I couldn't for the first month and a half that I was mowing out until very late June. And I came back here the first time I tried, but it was just too wet. It was muddy. And that's one of the lessons that I've learned about this place. This is more of a climate lesson than a rural versus city lesson. But I learned that if you're going to try and mow, you should probably walk on the area first if you have a low spot here in Michigan, or probably any place in the eastern U.S. because if it's squishing under your feet, you can't get a lawnmower on that. It's muddy. If you bring a lawnmower onto it, you might get stuck, or at the very least you'll cut ruts with the front wheels because they're pretty narrow. And if it's muddy, they're gonna sink right in, cut grooves into it. And I did do that. I didn't get stuck, thankfully. Dad did a couple years ago, and he had a lot more experience with this than I did. But even he would push it and avoid the lessons that he'd learned through life sometimes. But that's a big old mess. Because then you bring something else out, drag it out of there, and make an even bigger mess, and damage the ground even more. But I did have ruts, and I do have bumpy spots where they were. That's just lesson learned. So still learning. Anyway, yeah. So walk the low spots on your property before you mow in the eastern U.S. or any kind of wet climate, because you will damage it. So there you go. So here I am back on my semi-meadow back lawn. I have props. This is my rain gauge. I put this up at the end of August, very end of August, and as you can see, it's at about 1 inch. Now there's been some evaporation there. It's probably somewhere between 1.25 inches and 1.5 inches. Let's say 1.5 inches, that's fine. I can live with that. It was pretty warm in mid-August. It could have evaporated 1/2 inch. It's possible. Anyway, the Weather Channel site said about 1.75 inches for the month, and that's reasonable. 1/4 inch difference between two places, it can happen. I can go with that. It's still maybe half of what we'd normally get. We got a little over 3, maybe 3.25 or so in August, and August is usually a somewhat dry month for us. And NOAA gave us a rating of about 1/2 inch over normal, so believable. And even then, you're saying 2.75, so we were shy at least 1 inch for the month of September from normal, probably a little more, probably 1.5 inches, something like that. That's a lot to be short. It's almost half your rainfall. There have been periods like July where we probably got maybe 1/3 of our normal rainfall, or maybe 1/4. It was low. We should expect to get 3 inches or so per month in months when it's not snowing. Snow is a whole different story. It doesn't turn into water in a direct 1-to-1 ratio. I'll probably do a video on that. I mean, we'll have snow this year. It's gonna happen. I'll probably leave out a container and check the level between, let it fill it up with snow and then bring it inside and see how much water that actually turns into. There's a lot of air in between the snowflakes, so it's gonna be less. You might be surprised. I mean, I've heard numbers, but I've never actually checked it for myself, so it might be interesting to do. But anyway, so I came back here to talk about the thing that I mentioned before. There's a reason, aside from the aesthetics of breaking up the green space of a lawn, that I leave these weeds and wildflowers here. And that reason is to attract pollinators. Now, pollinators are things like bees and butterflies. And, honeybees have been having problems over the last decade or so. I think they've finally gotten a grasp of what's going on for that colony collapse disorder, so we're probably beyond the worst of it yet now. They seem to be rebounding a bit, and I see plenty of them because they're attracted to these flowers. They come in to pollinate. That's what they do. And same with butterflies. I've seen a greater variety of butterflies this year than most years, and definitely greater numbers. And it's good to have them around, not just for these things, not just for how pretty they are or whatever, but because it helps all the things that you want to grow, all the plants in your gardens or your flower beds or whatever, and all the crops that the farmers plant. Every bee that comes around is a potential pollinator for all those things, and that's a good thing. And same with butterflies. And so having them around is beneficial, and having all these plants draw them in, all these different flowers and things that attract them is good. It's beneficial to them, it's beneficial to us. So, do your part for pollinators, I guess. If you can do things for pollinators, especially monarch butterflies, they are in serious trouble. They are in serious decline in population. If you can find milkweed anywhere around you, leave it. Or plant some in your flower beds. Do something. You don't need a ton of it. Don't let it take over everything, but just give some of it, because that's where they lay their eggs. They lay their eggs that hatch into the caterpillars that become new monarch butterflies on milkweed, and it's like the preferred place for them to eat. So, try and do something if you can, if it's at all possible for you. The adults actually like the goldenrod, like this, but I see them on it a lot, and there's plenty of that around. I got a ton of goldenrod around here. A little on my own property. A lot of my neighbors, they have chunks that they don't mow. You can see back there. There's an area that's not mowed, and I'll get into that in another video too. Basically, beyond the border of my lawn is tall stuff on like two sides, and it's filled with goldenrod. Goldenrod. If you don't chop things down, goldenrod shows up like it did here. But anyway, that is basically the topic of the drought and the lawn effects and various other things, which is how it affects me. There is one other thing. If we were to get like sustained severe drought like they do in the Southwest, then it would be a bigger issue for even just simple people who just live in a house here, like me, because then it would be drying up our aquifer. It would not be getting replenished, and we're on well water. It's a rural area. That's a topic for probably the next video. One of the big differences between cities and rural areas is how you get your water. But yeah, and if the aquifer dries up, the well dries up, and that would be bad. That would be catastrophic. That would be cause for some serious alarm, because if your well dries up, your neighbor's tapping into the same aquifer. Probably all your neighbors around you are tapping into the same aquifer, and that would be a problem. And everybody would be drying up, and you would probably all have to call the few well diggers there are around, and that wouldn't be great. They'd be awfully busy, and you'd just have to wait your turn and to get yours drilled down lower. And that would be really not great. You don't want that. But that kind of drought just doesn't really happen here. There's no historical record of that kind of drought in this area, and so it's not a top of the line concern. If it does, it's a signal of greater climactic shift, and then there's a lot of people that are in for some problems. So there we go. Here come the geese. Oh, I think they're going to avoid me. But you can hear them. Anyway, that was the topic for the week, and I found it interesting. I hope you found it at least somewhat interesting or entertaining or informative. And if you did, there's always the good old stuff that you can do on the sidebar over here. You can subscribe to the channel so that you always have me over in your actual sidebar on the other side of the screen. Actually, that'd be over here, wouldn't it? And you could drop a like, put a comment in there. You could do whatever you wanted to. You could hit the notification bell so that every time you logged into YouTube and saw the, you'd see a little notification if I put up a new video. I plan to put up one of these every week, and I plan on putting little bits in between about the wildlife, depending on whether they cooperate to stay around to be filmed long enough. We'll find out. Those will be in between the vlog posts. And I'm so glad you watched, and I hope you all have
the best possible day you can. And I will see you soon. Take care.